So I happened to be at my local Nissan dealer here in Essendon, and they asked me whether I wanted to have a drive of this brand new Nissan Qashqai. So I'm going to show you around, take you for a spin, and tell you what I think. My name's Nish, and you're watching The Word on Cars. Oh, and by the way, it's an EV. Well, sort of. The Qashqai's been around since 2014, with Nissan releasing this newest generation in 2022. And what they've given us is a stylish and even sporty compact SUV that's different enough to stand out against the rest of the compact SUVs on sale today. What you're looking at here is the Ti with e-Power. If you haven't heard of e-Power, it's going to blow your mind, but I'll explain that one later. And the most expensive model in the Qashqai lineup, which costs a tad over $57,500. This one's finished in gun metallic, but if you're not a fan of this color, you can take your pick of 12 other colors, including 5 two-tone colors to choose from. And Christmas has come early because right now, Essendon Nissan is offering a staggeringly low 1% finance, so pop into Essendon Nissan or give them a bell if you want to find out more. And the Nissan Qashqai isn't just stylish on the outside, it also gets an equally stylish interior. You get a two-tone blue and black leather interior with white stitching. In fact, everywhere you look, there's exposed stitching. That really does give this cabin an upmarket look and feel. Most of the surfaces in here are soft to the touch, and it even gets textured trim throughout the cabin instead of cheap-looking plastic. Nissan's really stepped it up in here. There's good space up front as well for my 5'9" self, plenty of leg room, headroom, and even knee room. The steering wheel does get tilt and reach adjustment. The seats are fantastic, they're supremely comfortable, quilted, and someone at the Nissan factory's gone to town with stitching the hell out of these seats. They look bloody good. The front seats get a massaging function with a few modes, so you can chuck those on and go to your happy place. Now, with that, I will say that it's not a hard massage, feels more like an air bladder inflating and deflating against your back, but it works pretty well. And that's coming from a guy that hates massages. True story. And there's a panoramic glass roof in here which really opens up the cabin and tops it all off. Now, technology-wise, you got a 12.3-inch touchscreen that works well and somewhat customizable. You've got all the built-in standard features in the system, but let's be real, with built-in wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, most of you won't bother using anything else, nor would I. And there's a volume knob and a row of quick access buttons, so you won't have to fiddle around for those. There's a 10-speaker Bose stereo, which I'll say is fine, but it lacks clarity and isn't all that crisp. Still, sounds alright. If that's the worst thing about this Qashqai, I can deal. There's also a 12.3-inch driver instrument cluster, and that works a treat. You can stick to conventional dials, no tact though, instead you get a power reserve and regen meter, or flick to this more futuristic view, which gives you more real estate for everything else, and you get plenty of information to choose from. The Qashqai also gets what Nissan calls Pro Pilot, which includes adaptive cruise control and lane keeping. You also get the standard stuff like blind spot monitoring, front and rear emergency braking, automated parking so the Qashqai will park itself, and a surround view camera system. So when it comes to safety tech, this thing is loaded. The Ti also gets a 10.8-inch heads-up display, and that shows you everything, and I mean everything you could possibly want to see. And when it comes to keeping comfortable in here, rain, hail or shine, the Qashqai gets dual zone climate control with heated front seats. You get a panel of dials and buttons for that with independent screens, so it's super easy to use, and even a heated steering wheel. Nissan's also chucked in a whole lot of storage into the Qashqai. There's a modest glove box, not huge but big enough, space on the center console for the wireless phone charger where you'll also find a 12-volt power outlet, a couple of cup holders, split levels of storage under the center armrest so you can pull separate levers depending on which compartment you want to access. That's convenient. And there's USB-A and USB-C ports in here as well. And if you've got a Qashqai and wondered what the hell this is, it's a coin holder. Now you know. And to wrap up the front, the doors do get bins with bottle holders, which I will say aren't exactly huge, but they do the job. The back seats of the Qashqai aren't exactly something to write home about, but it's still quite comfortable and actually quite spacious. The seats are great, quilted with exposed stitching just like the front. You get the same two-tone blue and black interior, although there's a touch more plastic back here than the front. Space is fantastic. With the front seat set to my driving position, I have plenty of leg and knee room and space under the front seat for my size 11 feet, but headroom might not be the best for anyone over 6 feet. There's also a flat hump on the floor, doesn't really get in the way though, and the backseat passengers get their own vents, USB-A and USB-C ports, cup holders in the center armrest, bottle holders in the doors, and ISOFIX points for the outboard seats, and top tether mounts across all 3 seats to strap the kids in. And the windows back here don't go all the way down if that's something that's going to bother you. And when it comes to throwing your stuff into the boot, there's one of those magic electric tailgates that'll keep the kids entertained for a while. That opens up to reveal 452 liters of boot space. You get more space under the floor, and you can move the panels around and use them as dividers, which is handy. Under all of this, there isn't really much more space. Nissan's hid the battery and Bose subwoofer for the stereo back here, but you can drop the 60-40 split seats by pulling the latches on the seat backs to increase space to 1,376 liters with a completely flat floor, which makes loading and unloading a breeze. Then there's driving the Qashqai. And I gotta say, the first thing I noticed when I drove this out of the Nissan dealership and got it out on the road was the fact that it is superbly comfortable. I shit you not, this thing just glides down the road without a fuss. You could take someone, put a blindfold on them, put them in the Qashqai, and you could not blame them for thinking that this was a more expensive SUV because it just drives so well. It irons out the road surface in front of you. It is a touch heavy because of the hybrid battery in here, or the battery that this has. So it's pushing around 1,700 kilograms. That's a tare weight. And that translates to the Qashqai feeling really planted, just being pulled down to the road. In terms of tires, this has 19-inch wheels with Continental Eco Contact 6 tires, and those tires are fantastic. I think they do really contribute to how comfortable the Qashqai is, and it doesn't actually have any trick suspension either. It doesn't have adaptive dampers, none of that jazz. It's just really well set up by Nissan for everyday driving and everyday roads. It is just impressive. The other thing that's impressed me is how serenely quiet this cabin is. Now, with an EV, usually everything outside is amplified because the car is so quiet. With this though, it's just so well insulated. It is super quiet in here. No wind noise, no tire noise. It just gets down the road, keeping you in complete comfort. Honestly, it's impressive. It's very, very impressive. Now, I've also mentioned that this Qashqai is an EV. Well, it's an EV of sorts. And that's because we do have an engine under the hood. We have a 1.5 litre turbocharged 3-cylinder, but that isn't connected to the wheels at all. Instead, that acts like a generator, creating electricity and transferring that electricity to the motor, which is connected to the front wheels, which then puts the power down to the ground. So this thing is, by definition, really an EV. The only difference is that it charges with an engine. And because it has a 1-speed gearbox, it is super smooth. No gear changes, nothing getting in the way. It just accelerates, just like an EV. Now, in terms of power, we have 140 kilowatts and we have 330 Newton meters of torque. And that torque is available at 0 RPM. That's right, 0. EV, which means when you put this thing into sport, I've got this in eco at the moment, go into sport mode, you put your foot into it, it does give you a little bit of a shove into your seat and gets you moving forward. Now, it's not fast. 0 to 100 is 7.9 seconds, which I guess in the grand scheme of things isn't too bad. But the fact that you have that torque available at 0 RPM just gets this thing moving just like an EV. So it gives you the sensation of speed. And it has no problems getting up to speed either, to be completely honest with you. I mean, very easily gets up to speed. Now, on the engine, when it does kick into life, some might think that it's a bit of a weird feeling that you've got an engine up front and your car's been powered by electric motors. But to be honest with you, it is so unobtrusive. You really can't, firstly, this thing's so well insulated, so you can't really hear too much that's going on outside of you. And when the engine does kick in and when you do accelerate, sometimes you can hear it whirring away, but the speed of the engine is pretty much the same as the speed of the car, so it just gives you the same sensation as driving a petrol car when you can hear it, that is. So from that point of view, it doesn't get in the way at all. It doesn't impact the driving experience of this Qashqai. Now, this does also have an EV mode, so you can put it into EV mode and drive it in full EV mode when you've got juice in the batteries, which is nice. And speaking of batteries, we have a 1.8 kilowatt hour battery that sits under the Qashqai that cranks in as much juice as possible, so when you need it, it's there. Now, being an EV, this also has regen. Regen works quite subtly in this. You don't really even notice that it's regenerating electricity. That's what it does with regen, until you look at the dash here and you can see that the gauge has gone into regen mode. So it does its thing, pretty unobtrusive, don't really even know what's going on there. But stick this into e-pedal mode though, and it becomes a hell of a lot more aggressive. But with e-pedal though, you can one pedal drive this. So you could essentially just drive this with the accelerator and use the brake very seldom when you really need to come to a full stop. And that works so well. I mean, I'm getting used to driving this with the e-pedal that it's going to be hard to get back into my X-Trail and drive that around and have to stomp on the brakes. Now you do also have another mode in this called B mode. You just need to slide the gear lever back to get into B mode, and that also puts us into regen. It's better for start-stop traffic situations where you want to try and capture as much electricity as possible when the Qashqai is slowing down. Now with all this regen and e-pedal business, one might think that the braking performance is impacted, but to be honest with you, it has had no impact at all. In fact, Nissan's given the Qashqai beefier brakes on all four corners with floating calipers, and I imagine that's because this thing weighs a little bit more than it should for what is a compact SUV, and the brakes work really well. Progressive, good feel, brings this thing to a stop when you need it to. So in terms of braking, they work. When it comes to fuel efficiency, this thing will do 5.2 litres per 100 kilometers, although this thing came with a full tank of fuel and that gauge has not moved at all. So either Nissan's lying to us or that's broken. I don't think it's broken. But having said that, it does have an engine under the hood, so you need to feed it fuel. You'll need to feed it 95 octane fuel because it won't run on anything less because it is turbocharged. Now, if you compare this to other SUVs in the market, sure, there are hybrids and other SUVs out there that'll do around the 5.2 mark or even better. But what makes this so good though is the fact that it's an EV at the end of the day, and you've got that torque from 0 RPM, and you can do things like put your foot down and have a little bit of fun. Now, like I said, it's not fast, but sure makes you feel like you're fast. Now, the steering in this I would describe as being fine. It does weight up a little in sport mode, but otherwise it just works. Not really much feedback. Feels electrically assisted, which it is, and it's not really a fast steering rack either. But in an SUV like this, all you need to do is work, and it works. Now, I will say though that I really like the steering wheel in this. It is really nicely wrapped in leather. It has a flat bottom. It's got all the controls you need on the steering wheel itself, and it just looks good. Feels good. I like the steering in this. So, after everything I've shown you, should you add the Qashqai to your Christmas list? Well, you should, if you're looking for a compact SUV. As someone that owns the previous generation Nissan X-Trail and having spent a fair bit of time in the old Qashqai, this thing is a huge leap forward. It looks good, it's comfortable, spacious, and got the tech. And for those of you out there that are on the fence about jumping into an EV, this is the perfect stepping stone. You can forget about range anxiety and even charging. Just fill this thing up and drive it like any other car, with the pros of having better fuel economy and the performance you get from an EV. And with 1% finance through my friends at Essendon Nissan, the Qashqai then is really a no-brainer and definitely one to add to the list. Thanks for watching.